In 1865, America was a broken nation. Cities lay in ruins. Over 600,000 men were dead. The economy was shattered. European powers looked at the United States with pity, not fear. Yet just 80 years later, America would stand as the world's undisputed superpower, possessing half the world's manufacturing capacity, the only atomic weapons on Earth, and military bases spanning the globe. This is the story of the most dramatic rise to power in modern history, but it was never inevitable. America's path to dominance was filled with missteps, near disasters, and choices that could have gone very differently. The story begins not with triumph, but with carnage. The American Civil War was the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history. Brother fought brother. The South was devastated. Atlanta burned. Richmond fell. When Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox in April 1865, the United States faced an uncertain future. Would the nation even survive? Could the wounds ever heal? But something remarkable happened during the war. The North's industrial capacity exploded. Factories that once made farm equipment now produced rifles. Textile mills churned out uniforms. Railroad companies laid thousands of miles of track to move troops and supplies. By war's end, the North had created a modern industrial economy almost by accident. The decades after the Civil War saw America transform from an agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, linked the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Telegraph lines crisscrossed the nation. Oil gushed from wells in Pennsylvania. Steel mills rose in Pittsburgh. Inventors like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell revolutionized technology. Immigration fueled this growth. Between 1870 and 1900, over 12 million immigrants arrived in America. Irish, Germans, Italians, Eastern Europeans, Chinese. They provided the labor that built the railroads, mined the coal, and worked the factories. America's population doubled. Cities exploded in size. By 1900, the United States had the world's largest economy, surpassing even Great Britain. But America was not yet a superpower. It had wealth, yes, but not power. The U.S. military was tiny compared to European armies. America had no overseas empire like Britain or France. Most Americans wanted nothing to do with foreign entanglements. George Washington's warning against foreign alliances still echoed. America looked inward, not outward. That began to change in 1898. The Spanish-American War was a turning point. When the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, likely due to an accident, American newspapers blamed Spain and demanded war. "Remember the Maine" was the rallying cry. Congress declared war, and America crushed Spain in just 10 weeks. Suddenly, America had an empire. The United States took control of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Cuba became a U.S. protectorate. America had bases in the Caribbean and the Pacific. President Theodore Roosevelt proclaimed that America would speak softly and carry a big stick. The era of American isolationism was ending. Roosevelt pushed America onto the world stage. He mediated the end of the Russo-Japanese War, winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He sent the Great White Fleet, 16 battleships, on a voyage around the world to showcase American naval power. Most importantly, he built the Panama Canal, one of history's greatest engineering achievements. The canal gave America control over a strategic choke point between two oceans. But World War I nearly derailed everything. When war erupted in Europe in 1914, most Americans wanted no part of it. President Woodrow Wilson promised to keep America neutral. "Too proud to fight," he declared. America traded with both sides, growing rich off European suffering while staying safe across the Atlantic. Then Germany made a catastrophic mistake. In 1917, Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking American ships. The British intercepted the Zimmermann telegram, revealing Germany's attempt to ally with Mexico against the U.S. American public opinion shifted dramatically. In April 1917,
Congress declared war on Germany. America's entry tipped the balance. Fresh American troops, eventually over 2 million, poured into France. American industrial might supplied the Allies with weapons, food, and financing. Germany's last-ditch offensives failed. By November 1918, the war was over. America had proved it could project military power across an ocean and decisively influence a global conflict. At the Paris Peace Conference, Woodrow Wilson proposed his 14 points and his vision for a League of Nations, an international organization to prevent future wars. Wilson was hailed as a hero in Europe. He seemed poised to reshape the world order with America at its center. But then American politics intervened. The U.S. Senate rejected the Treaty of Versailles and refused to join the League of Nations. Isolationist sentiment surged back. Americans were disillusioned by the war's cost and suspicious of European entanglements. The United States retreated from world leadership. Instead of building on its newfound power, America turned inward again. The 1920s and 1930s saw America withdraw from global affairs. Congress passed strict immigration restrictions. High tariffs choked off international trade. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, America focused entirely on domestic recovery. As fascism rose in Europe and militarism in Japan, America did nothing. The superpower that could have prevented World War II chose to stay home. This isolationism was understandable but dangerous. Americans remembered the horrors of World War I and wanted no more foreign wars. But by refusing to engage, America allowed aggressive dictators to grow stronger. Hitler rebuilt Germany's military in violation of Versailles. Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. Japan conquered Manchuria. The world order collapsed, and America watched from afar. When World War II began in 1939, America remained neutral at first. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to help Britain and France, but Congress and public opinion tied his hands. The Neutrality Acts forbade arms sales to warring nations. Roosevelt could only watch as France fell and Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. Then everything changed December 7, 1941. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor killed over 2,400 Americans and destroyed much of the Pacific Fleet. The next day, Congress declared war on Japan. Days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. America was fully committed to a two-ocean war against the Axis powers. What followed was the greatest mobilization in human history. American industry shifted entirely to war production. Factories that made cars now built tanks and planes. Women entered the workforce by the millions. Shipyards launched new vessels every week. By 1944, America was producing more war material than all other combatants combined, Allied and Axis. American strategy was simple but effective: overwhelm the enemy with superior resources. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy rebuilt from Pearl Harbor and systematically destroyed Japanese naval power. Island-hopping campaigns brought American forces closer to Japan. In Europe, American and British forces invaded North Africa, then Italy, then France on D-Day. American troops fought in every theater, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Burma. The atomic bomb ended the war in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Developed in secret by American scientists in the Manhattan Project, the bomb represented a revolution in warfare. When America dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, Japan surrendered within days. World War II was over, and America possessed the ultimate weapon. By 1945, the American position was unprecedented. The U.S. economy was larger than the next several powers combined. American factories were undamaged, while Europe and Asia lay in ruins. The U.S. military had over 12 million personnel and bases around the world. America had the atomic bomb and the means to deliver it anywhere. No nation in history had ever been so dominant. But America faced a new challenge: the Soviet Union. The wartime alliance between the U.S. and the USSR collapsed almost immediately. Stalin imposed communist regimes across Eastern Europe. Communist parties threatened to take power in France, Italy, and Greece. The Soviets blockaded Berlin. In 1949, the Soviets tested their own atomic bomb. The Cold War had begun. America responded with a strategy of containment. The Truman Doctrine promised American support to nations resisting communism. The Marshall Plan poured billions into rebuilding Western Europe, creating prosperous democracies and reliable allies. NATO formed in 1949 as a military alliance against Soviet expansion. America committed to defending Western Europe indefinitely. The Cold War forced America to abandon isolationism permanently. The U.S. maintained a massive peacetime military for the first time in its history. American troops stationed in Europe, Japan, and Korea never came home. The CIA conducted covert
Operations worldwide. America signed defense treaties with dozens of nations. The United States had become a global empire in all but name. Korea tested America's resolve. When communist North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, President Truman immediately sent troops. The Korean War was brutal and ended in stalemate, but America had proved it would fight to contain communism. The message to Moscow was clear: America would not retreat. Vietnam was different. America's involvement escalated slowly through the 1950s and 1960s. By 1968, over 500,000 American troops were in Vietnam, fighting a guerrilla war in jungles against an enemy that wouldn't quit. The war divided America like nothing since the Civil War. Protests erupted across the nation. The Tet Offensive in 1968 shattered public confidence. America eventually withdrew in 1973, and South Vietnam fell in 1975. It was America's first clear defeat. But America's superpower status survived Vietnam. The U.S. economy remained the world's largest. American military technology advanced rapidly. Most importantly, America's alliance system held firm. Western Europe and Japan remained loyal allies. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, was stagnating. By the 1980s, the USSR's economy couldn't keep up with American military spending. Ronald Reagan accelerated the pressure. His military buildup, including the controversial Strategic Defense Initiative, forced the Soviets into an arms race they couldn't win. When Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985, he recognized the USSR needed reforms. Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika unleashed forces he couldn't control. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed entirely. America had won the Cold War without firing a shot at the Soviets. The United States stood alone as the world's sole superpower. American military superiority was unchallenged. The American economy was booming. Democracy and capitalism seemed to be spreading worldwide. Some declared the end of history, the final triumph of Western liberal democracy. But superpower status came with burdens. America faced new challenges in the post-Cold War world: terrorism, rogue states, failed states, cyber warfare, threats that couldn't be deterred by nuclear weapons. The September 11th attacks in 2001 showed America's vulnerability. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq proved that military might couldn't easily solve complex political problems. Today, America's superpower status faces questions. China's rise challenges American economic dominance. Russia seeks to disrupt the international order. American public opinion increasingly questions the costs of global leadership. The debates echo those of the 1920s and 1930s. Should America lead the world or focus on problems at home? So how did America become a superpower? Through a combination of geography, resources, immigration, innovation, and strategic choices. America benefited from being isolated from old-world conflicts while possessing vast natural resources and a growing population. American democracy and capitalism unleashed economic dynamism,
and at critical moments, 1917, 1941, 1947, American leaders chose engagement over isolation. But the story also shows how easily things could have gone differently. If the Senate had approved the League of Nations, perhaps World War II never happens. If America had stayed isolationist in 1941, Britain might have fallen, and Hitler could have dominated Europe. If Truman had committed to containment in 1947, Western Europe might have fallen to communism. Each decision mattered enormously. America's rise to superpower status was not inevitable. It required leadership, sacrifice, and the willingness to engage with the world despite the costs. The question now is whether America will continue to bear those burdens, or whether, like previous superpowers, it will eventually decline. History suggests that no empire lasts forever, but history also shows that America has overcome enormous challenges before. The empire where the sun never set became Britain. The Reich that would last 1,000 years lasted 12. The Soviet Union that promised to bury capitalism buried itself. America has now been the world's leading power for over 75 years. How much longer that continues depends on choices Americans make today, just as America's rise depended on choices made by previous generations. Superpower status is not a permanent condition. It must be earned, maintained, and constantly renewed. Thanks for watching. If you found this exploration of American power interesting, subscribe for more history content. Next time, we'll examine another nation's path to global influence. Until then, remember, history is made by choices, not destiny.